This video was brought to you by Too Long. That's the official TLDR newspaper we've made and which is available to order right now. The last decade or so has been particularly brutal for the Lib Dems. In 2010, it appeared that they were on course for a historic victory. Cleggmania was rampant, and it seemed that many saw them as the party of change, a breath of fresh air amongst the stale, samey parties of old. In the election, although they reduced their seat share from 2005, they found themselves in the position of being the kingmakers. Clegg ultimately opted to form a government with David Cameron, and for the first time in almost a century, they were back in power. During this unlikely alliance, the Lib Dems were blamed for many of the unpopular parts of governance, for austerity, for tripling tuition fees, and for failing to enact more constitutional change. As such, the Lib Dems have been punished in subsequent elections, dropping from almost 60 seats in the 2010 election to around 10 in all three elections post-2010. However, with an election set to take place next year, and with the Lib Dems scooping up by-election wins in the interim, there's been some speculation that next year could be a renaissance for the Lib Dems. So in this video, we're going to have a look into this claim, starting by looking at where the Lib Dems are currently, why this year has been such a good year for the Lib Dems, and whether this positive news could translate into a particularly good election for them next year. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. So let's start with where the Lib Dems are currently. As things stand, the Lib Dems have 15 MPs, which itself is actually an increase of 4 since the 2019 general election. As we mentioned in the intro, compared to the number of seats that they've had in the last decade or so, this isn't a particularly strong position to be in. However, it is worth looking at the extra 4 seats they've gained since 2019. These came from by-elections, and to be fair to them, their successes in these constituencies have been massively impressive. Their first success came in 2021 in Cheshire and Amersham. The by-election only came about because the Tory MP, Dame Cheryl Gillen, sadly died from cancer. The Lib Dems took the seat, overturning a huge 16,223 vote majority, and securing a majority of 8,028 for themselves. Considering the constituency had been held by the Tories ever since its creation in 1974, this was a considerable achievement. It's also worth noting here that the Lib Dems managed to take votes not just from the Tories, whose vote share decreased by 5.3%, but also from Labour, whose vote share decreased by an even larger 7.7%. There were two main takeaways from this by-election. The first was that this was an indication that voters may be becoming more switched on to the merit of tactical voting. The anti-Tory vote didn't fragment between the Lib Dems and Labour, it coalesced around the Lib Dems. Secondly, it showed that the Lib Dems were able to win seats that were historically Tory. About this, Lib Dem leader Ed Davies said on Twitter that, if the Lib Dems can beat the Tories here, we can beat them anywhere. And indeed, these lessons can be seen in the other 3 by-election successes. North Shropshire was another Conservative safe seat, with it being Tory since its creation all the way back in 1832. Tiverton and Honiton has been a Tory safe seat since its creation in 1997, and Somerton and Frome has been a Tory safe seat since 2015, although it had been Lib Dem before this. In all of these by-elections, Labour's vote share decreased from 2019, and this decrease was in the double digits in all by-elections. The point is, the Lib Dems have been absolutely crushing it in parliamentary by-elections. Now, they normally do quite well in by-elections anyway, and are usually used as the anti-Tory protest vote. However, the key difference here is the scale of the majorities they've overturned. Of the 20 biggest by-election swings since 1945, 4 have been Lib Dem victories by Ed Davey since 2021. This positivity for the Lib Dems doesn't just end with by-elections though. There's now some evidence that it could be transferring to polling for next year's general election. Right now, electoral calculus predicts that the Lib Dems will end up with 30 seats. This is based on polling which predicts that they'll secure around 10% of the national vote. Now, this does seem to be in line with most major polling companies, who also predict that the Lib Dems will win somewhere in this region of votes at the next election. Now, sure, 30 seats isn't the nearly 60 that they won back in 2010, but it is nearly triple what they won back in 2019. If this were to happen, it would give the Lib Dems hope of moving forward, and potentially provide them with a springboard to climb in the polls in future elections. Right now, they're the fourth largest party in the UK, behind the Tories, Labour and the SNP. If they win the 30 seats that they're predicted, and the SNP collapse in Westminster in the way that pollsters expect them to, then the Lib Dems could become the third party in Westminster once again. This would be massive for them. Instantly, the Lib Dems would gain 2 permanent questions at PMQs. They would receive significantly more invites from journalists, most notably the BBC, and their leader would get a huge amount more name recognition, which would help them, as right now only half of Britons have actually heard of their leader, Ed Davey. So all in all, the next election could be significant for the Lib Dems. There is only one caveat. All of this hinges on the Lib Dems actually winning these 30 seats. Now, back in 2019, the Lib Dems won 11.6% of the national vote and secured only 11 seats. Pollsters predict that the Lib Dems will win a smaller number of votes next year and are somehow expecting them to almost triple their seat share. So what gives? Well, back in 2019, the Lib Dems came second in 91 constituencies. This in itself is the problem. There's a mantra in British politics when it comes to elections: win small, lose big. For all political parties, money is a finite resource, and wasting it converting voters to vote for a losing candidate is not money well spent. This is money that could have been used in a marginal seat pushing your candidate over the line. Ed Davey appears to know this, and has been ruthlessly targeting only a handful of seats. He's spent time building an electoral machine, which only pushes messages that they're certain will resonate with voters on the doorstep, such as discussing the NHS and the cost of living crisis, without trying to win voters over with discussions about things that Lib Dem activists are concerned about, such as electoral reform. So, while the predicted vote share may be similar to what the Lib Dems achieved in 2019, Davey is hoping that these will be far more targeted and that as a result, 2024 could be the start of a major Lib Dem resurgence. If you want more from TLDR and want to support our journalism, consider picking up a copy of our newspaper, Too Long. This is a one-off physical newspaper we've been working on over the last few months, which includes 32 pages of analysis and explainers from the TLDR team on everything from Ukraine and Gaza to the state of the French and German governments, or the upcoming elections in the UK, US, and around the world. It's not just us either. We have a full interview with creator and journalist Johnny Harris that people who buy the newspaper can also watch via a special QR code. Plus, there's articles from a ton of other creators, including JJ McCullough, Search Party, Sophia Smith-Gaylor, and many more. This really has been a very exciting project for us to work on, and hopefully you can already see all the work we've put into it, even the TLDR-themed crossword. So if you want to pick up a copy and help fund our journalism on YouTube as we head into 2024, then the link to the store is in the description. Plus, you can get 20% off your purchase this week only by using code TLDRUK at checkout. And with a limited quantity available, if you do want one, I'd order soon, especially if you want it before Christmas. As always, thanks so much for your support, and I hope you like this silly but genuinely very good project as much as we do. Thank you.